And there it is.
Ooh.
Click. And we're live. It is Christmas. And I have to say, when Kate and I first started doing In Lieu of Fun, if you had told me we would still be doing it on Christmas, I think I would have giggled or maybe vomited. But here it is, Christmas, 5 o'clock p.m. And Kate, you have the monologue today, being the Christmas celebrating member of the show.
Oh yeah. Thank you. I don't know. I'm not like I'm neither one for pomp and circumstances, but I do like kind of a good excuse to do something nice. So, or like indulgent, guilt-free, or hopefully guilt-free. Anyway, so we had a very quiet little Christmas, just the two of us, and it was lovely. We've been eating through this insane French dinner that I bought. It took me I got kind of drunk and watched Big Lebowski last night, and then ate like
That's not a
half.
Christmas movie.
No, but that's what I wanted to do. So I was like, I don't have to. I was like, no one's going to send me any emails late tonight or tomorrow, and so that can kind of be what happens. And it was lovely, and very fun, and much better than all of the crying that happened because I watched Rent. So I don't know. It's been a very lovely little day. I had calls with all of our family. I felt very lucky that like all of them were available to have calls with. I read that incredibly depressing people not at the Christmas table story that the New York Times did. And it was just kind of dark, and decided to put that away. And I put on this shirt, which is whimsical and great. And my brother got it for me, which is, I don't know if people are familiar with, I don't actually know how to pronounce his name, but Tomi Younger. He was a illustrator, born in a French illustrator. But he used to do like these kind of very basic illustrations in children's books. He won like the Hans Christian Andersen Award for Children's Literature. He was pretty great. Anyways, one of my favorite books growing up with my brother was The Three Robbers that's illustrated by Tomi Unger, and there's like a really kind of schmaltzy like 70s German animation of it. And the story is basically that there are these three robbers, and they like go around robbing all of these castles in France with like all of these like an axe and a musket and something else. I forget what the third thing is. And anyways, one day they accidentally end up stealing a child, like a baby, and it changes them. Like fatherhood changes the three robbers, and they decide to take all of their money that they've been hoarding from all of these castles and to give it to create an orphanage. And so that's what they do, and that's like the end of the story. But I just like, it's just the illustrations are great, and the show is like, the movie is like captivating. And so
Did they give the baby back?
No, they don't. The baby apparently is like happy with them, but oh no, maybe they do give it back. But this is like all of the illustrations from like the movie, and like they're just kind of very, I don't know, they're just like really, really fun, and like I don't know, it's just very yeah. I'll put a link to it in the chat. But it's like I think like a 15-minute movie. But it's super cute. And I don't know, it's like a very strong memory for some reason or another. And my brother also has a strong memory, and he sent me this. So that was kind of cool. I don't know. That's
Excellent.
like pretty much it. Like,
well, speaking of stolen babies, I have here Baby Prosecco, who
Baby Prosecco? No, you're not.
I am not going to drink Baby Prosecco because Baby Cannon would be upset with me, because they have unfinished business.
It's like, yeah, it's like his girlfriend.
Well, it's more Baby Cannon's nemesis. It's like Moriarty to, and I think Baby Cannon would be upset if I, destroyed his life's work or her life's work. And but I am thinking about what the final showdown between Baby Prosecco and Baby Cannon's going to look like. Meanwhile, I'm drinking other Prosecco.
Yeah. How's your day been? Anything interesting?
I sharpened my chainsaw in
Again?
preparation. Yeah, you got to sharpen them pretty regularly.
I think you're a better chainsaw owner than anyone I know.
Well, I also have hardwood trees in the backyard,
Oh.
and three of them have fallen, and I've been using a bunch of chainsaw action over the last few months, and so you kind of have to sharpen them pretty regularly, or they become not very effective, and that's when they get dangerous about kicking and stuff. And I've got, going to do some hacking up of wood over the next 48 hours, and
I don't know. Sounds
drag.
fun.
Yeah. Oh, I like cutting up trees, down trees, and I dragged some chopped wood up to stack for the fire because it's super cold here, which is kind of interesting. It's much colder here than it is where you are.
I know. Isn't that weird? Did you see that Boston had like a high of 56 today and like it was the highest temperature in the contiguous United States?
Yeah, it was the warmest city in the biggest
Oh, yes,
city in the
that's what it was.
contiguous United States, and Miami was 55, was lower, but here at the cabin in the woods it is 23 degrees, and it was
Yeah.
snowing for a good chunk of the day, lightly, but it was very pleasant. So we've had a wood stove fire going the whole day, and I had to drag up a whole lot of wood for it, so that was nice.
I
And
like the ritual of heating your home with a wood stove.
yeah, I do too.
I've gotten quite like I understand things would be easier if I didn't, but there's something very like really nice and cathartic about like a part of your daily day being to haul in wood. I don't or to like be a little bit cold. Like colder than you'd want to be and have to like fix it. I don't know. Like I don't know why I
Yeah,
feel
no,
that
I'm
way.
I'm totally with you. I also really like splitting wood. Um, chainsaw is fun in a kind of you know like
I don't love bucking logs or drag or like we used to in we'd help with do you have to drag them or when do you fall them and then do you like cut them then or do you let
I
them
cut them
dry
on
for a
I
while?
cut them I cut them in
In the
location. So
box.
these are trees that were dry enough to fall in the first place, and I usually let them, not because I'm planning it, just because I don't get to it for a few months. They sit in place for a while, and so you know, by the time you get to them, they're I would say semi-seasoned, and then you cut them up in place, and once they're all split, then you move them.
One of my favorite oh sorry, go ahead.
No, the only part of it that I don't enjoy is the moving. I like sectioning the trees, and I like splitting the wood. But schlepping split wood is a pain in the ass.
Well, you must split it where you fell it then?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
generally.
like
Sometimes I'll stack the discs for a few months and then sort of split it in my own time. But a lot of these are the one that I'm working on now is a relatively young tree, and it came down. I'm not sure why. It wasn't lightning, but it was something like sudden. I wasn't here when it happened, but it may have been soft ground or something, but it came down hard. So the actual pieces that I'm working are not. They're actually don't need to be split.
yeah.
They're thick branches that are good firewood by themselves.
That's nice. Yeah, when we used to help out at our friend, like our John's like friends, family, friends, whatever, you like have this huge place, not huge place, but a lot of land in a small house in like Vermont, and like they do all of their own kind of forestry or managing the forest and do a lot of felling of the trees, and then I leave them there for like 2 years and make notes of like where they left the trees, and then they get them on a sled on the bobcat and we drag them all back, and then we split them at the same, but they go through 9 cords of wood as like winter, like that's like, so it makes a lot of sense for them to have something kind of, but they, for some reason that I've never understood, they don't own a splitter despite having doing all of that, and but I love running a splitter. I love
Yeah,
it.
they're fun.
It's like, it's so fun. There is just this like, there is something about like the hydraulic pressure and the lever and like the pop when it finally cracks that like is just really like lovely about wood. I don't like, yeah. It's it's been nice to do this. I'm glad you guys get a fire in some cold today because it's like 60 degrees here and John's yelling at me about having a fire in the fireplace. Like, we don't need this at all.
So, we have an agenda item today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. We have to figure out what to do about trolls in the chat.
Oh, yeah. We were going to talk about that. Yeah, yeah. I like this agenda item.
So one possibility is to do nothing more than what we've done, which is you and I keep an eye out for them. People in the chat complain about them. We give them people a certain amount of running room, and then we roast them. Second possibility is just to ignore them and actually be more lenient than we have been. A third possibility is to try to force all the trolls, sorry to all our loyal followers on YouTube, but to force the trolls out of Crowdcast and say, hey, anybody can say anything they want in the setting that we don't police, which is to say the YouTube feed. But if you want to be part of this Crowdcast community that, we bring people in on, it's a community that involves a certain amount of trust. And
I've always thought that there's a huge amount of trust, actually. It's not just a certain amount. Like when you first started bringing people in, like to ask their questions with video, I like was so nervous. Maybe I'm like maybe I'm a little bit jaded, but like I was terrified that you were going to rapture someone in and they were just going to do something totally disruptive or something else. So, I mean, which still could happen, but yeah.
So Tom McGuckin is jokingly asking about whether he is a troll because I accidentally once policed him. Tom, you know perfectly well. You know perfectly well that I am you are a valued member of this community. But we have a demand for a troll poll. So I think we should definitely have a troll poll. How should we handle trolls? Leave them alone / ignore them.
Part of me has... I'm going to make the pitch really quick about maybe just ignoring it, which is that, like, we haven't... I feel like in 274 episodes, wow, 275 tomorrow, Jesus Christ, we have just had very few really egregious trolls, at least not in Crowdcast, and some on YouTube, which you both booted off, and they might still exist, but I don't pay attention to that. I don't really care anymore. I don't know. Like, I feel like that's a pretty great ratio. Like,
right. So the argument for being more active is, number one, that the audience is growing. I mean, it is
YouTube
Christmas.
Or Crowdcast? On
Crowdcast. It's Christmas Day, and we have 125 people live right now. And
Remember when like 8 people showed up
Yeah, I
to
mean, it used to be
watch?
like 8 or 9, right? And so the more people who sign on, the less I think the worse it could get. As
That's certainly
to
true.
the discussion going on in the chat about how many people it is more than one. So here's what I can tell you with what the intelligence community calls high confidence about the trolls. There is one person who has shown up repeatedly under a variety of different names,
Yes.
who is a kind of right-wing Trumpist troll,
We ish. Like slash
ish,
just yeah.
who
And
hates the Yale Law
anti-Semitic.
School, who hates Foucault,
No, he. Oh, I
and
thought that they loved Foucault.
well,
No,
the
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 opposite.
the
But like
line
they
is
mention it all the
Foucault.
time.
It's Foucault's world. We all just live in it, and
Okay, yes. I
so
couldn't.
that is troll number one who exists under certain names. Then there is another person who started under on our YouTube feed and used the pseudonym associated with various pseudonyms associated with John le Carré,
Yeah.
and always had a sort of left-wing anti-interventionist, somewhat anti-Semitic slant that, and was devoted to the idea that I was a drunk and Kate was
Also a drunk or cupcake. I was a
yes, a
cupcake.
cupcake. There was
Jesus Christ, I hated that.
a lot of
Like,
demeaning things about Kate. I am pretty sure those are two different people.
but we've had discussions about the fact that they could be the same person because there's weird this could be one of our Venn mode diagrams, Ben. Like there's weird overlapping similarities. Like they use three names often, or something kind of like that they show up at the, like you'll ban one and one will show up at the like another one will show up sounding like the other. Like there was the other day that you banned the anti-Semitic, leftist-leaning, anti-interventionist person, and then all of a sudden someone came in that was like new with a new name that was like talking about Foucault, and we were like, But it was like literally within like 5 minutes of each other,
That's right.
and no one had mentioned Foucault in like
In
months,
weeks.
weeks, and like all of a sudden it was like Foucault is in the chat 5 minutes after you banned someone. So like that's why I think that they're connected in some way.
So I am perfectly fine to just do what we've been doing and expel people as need be. I My one concern about it is that the thing could become unmanageable relatively quickly. So if we have 125 people a day in Crowdcast and then another 1,000 to 2,000 who were watching each episode either live or in reruns on YouTube, that's a problem like that is manageable the way we've been doing it. But if you imagine that there are 300 people a day on the Crowdcast, or 500 or 600, right? We wouldn't have to have a major breakthrough before you have hundreds of people here whom we don't know and who none of the audience knows. And you could really imagine
this is a classic
over,
content moderation problem.
overflowing the culture that has been established in the and you know, right now there's there's enough of an established culture in that chat, and people actually know each other, and so
welcome new people, and people like get brought into the culture.
exactly. But if you imagine it growing, I mean, it was only a few weeks ago that we were like at 75 people a day. Now we're at 125 people a day. And so
Yeah.
I think we should assume there's a trajectory of growth that is going to make the sort of self-enforcing norms a little bit hard to manage. And also, here's the other thing that's been concerning me. I can't follow the chat anymore,
No, I can't either.
except when you're talking to the guest. Then I can kind of look over at the
Because
chat.
it's the opposite justification. If you're on the screen, it changes justification. Right? So
Exactly.
like I'm on the left, I'm on the right for me right now, and everyone else is on the left, and so it like stands out as like a comment. But yeah,
But it's also just that it's moving so fast, and so if you imagine growth above a certain level, it would actually be impossible to have a conversation in there that anybody could follow, let alone the two of us.
yeah. So I have a few ideas. I don't think I mentioned these to you, but I was thinking about them. One about, and I'm kind of actually interested in what Mike Godwin thinks about this, because this is like, for a while, I've been mulling over how much this community, the show has its content and its specific meaning, but like there is also very much, and I'm not in denial about this at all, that like people don't come necessarily for us or any one of the guests. They come to talk to themselves, to talk with themselves and like the friendships that they've developed here, which I think is one of the most wonderful parts of like everything we've done, if not the most wonderful. It's kind of just great to have this community. We want to protect that, but it reminds me very much of like early gamer communities or Second Life or anything like that. And then like those and like, or any type of like Reddit chat or like a wiki kind of series of edits that remain small for a period of time. I don't think real name policy works. For one, in this context, it doesn't work because Crowdcast doesn't support it. Like Crowdcast lets you just log in anonymously, and people can do that infinitely with as many fake email addresses as they ever want to have. So that there's that. I don't think it kind of like would matter if we had them do real name. Does that make sense?
So, real name would, I mean, I am sensitive to the fact that there are people in this community who are real members of this community, super like good faith, real valued members of the community. I'm thinking of Fubar, Toy Tanks, etc., who are for
BBB.
yeah, for one reason or another, not interested in sharing their real names, and I'm totally respectful of that. I do think that the I do think that the when you have a culture in which real names are the average, are the norm, there's something about being able to address people by their names and saying, John cut it out, that matters. And there's also something about, honestly, your or my being able to email people offline to real accounts and say, hey, that was uncool, that is actually valuable. And so but I don't, I know there are too many people. I'm just looking at the chat right now.
There's no way.
There's too many people who have good reasons not to do it,
It's not just
including.
that. I don't know how we would ever enforce, like, Ira David sounded like a real name,
Not to
right?
me, it
Like,
didn't.
really?
No, I knew that Ira David wasn't real early on.
Does anyone hyphenate?
Because the ghost
Like,
of George Smiley and Peter Gwillem disappeared on
oh,
YouTube, and Ira David Stein, who had a mysteriously Jewish name,
that was mysteriously
you
Jewish.
know,
But
yeah,
I
I mean,
wouldn't
so it's
feel
like a
comfortable saying
relentlessly
something
Jewish
was,
name
I know, but
showed
I
up
wouldn't
and
feel
sounded
comfortable saying
exactly
that.
like them, including all the anti-Semitic stuff and the obsession with the fact that I have a drink
You.
every
Yeah.
episode,
I People
and
obsess over that for both of us, though. People like obsess over the drink. It's so weird. I'm just like, what do you think people like? What do you like? That's, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. I don't let that bother me anymore. It bothered me at first. Um, but hold on. So like, okay, so real name, I do not think, because of the tools the Crowdcast provides us and our capabilities, solves any of our problems for both having anonymous trolls or like banning our friends. Like, I feel like the ratio there ends up just not being worth it. Like, we're not going to get payoff if people want to like futz with us, they're going to do in my estimation, the um the thing that like I think we need to do, and I kind of really want to actually hear what Mike Godwin has to say, if Mike wants to come in.
Hey, Mike, should we
Yeah,
bring you in?
but I kind of think that this is the exact size and shape of a community that starts to, and has the personality types in the community to start having voluntary moderators, in the same way that like Reddit and other kinds of various communities have moderators, and like stated rules somewhere. And people did create this in the beautiful kind of website that Michael Fromberger made for us, and other things. And so in my mind, what needs to happen is like maybe at the start of the show, people trade off being moderators. There's a different one every day. People sign up, they manage it within themselves. And we have a list of terms and conditions that are basically like, it can be one sentence of like, just be nice, and like, you know, and the appeal thing can be that they can appeal to us if like a moderator decides to ban them. We can look at what happened, and like maybe that's kind of like what happens, but hopefully that wouldn't be, it would be far and few between, and people who'd want to like throw a fit about it wouldn't be that many. And then people moderate for us and flag problematic things, because like you said, there's no way that you and I can host this and watch the chat, and there's no way that like, and I'm like lost track of all of the people in this community. Like I know like a bunch of them, but I think there's a bunch more that all interact with each other on Twitter and like, and on like what's the D word, the discourse. So like they're all in like, and so like I'm not part of those communities, so they have the community is like, they know even better than I do what the norms are and who's acting out. I mean, I think that you and I can always flag people, but like that'll be our prerogative. It's like the kind of things. Hi, Mike.
What do you think, Mike? What's the right answer to this?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, I think there are multiple answers depending on the type of community you're designing. So and that's one of the reasons why a lot of, I get worried about Facebook ready to cut a deal with government to decide what the rules are, because Facebook has a particular model for how it wants different communities to engage, but it's not clear that that's the only model. Reddit has a very different model with upvotes and downvotes and different people with administrative powers. Wikipedia has a different model. The Well has a different model. So one idea that I've been thinking about and working on is the idea that if you are a contributor to a forum, you can sort of build reputational equity by some kind of points system. Like if people like your contributions, you can sort of bank that. And then when you have a certain amount of reputational equity associated with your account, then you have sort of more authority to call into question other people's content that may be disruptive or violate community standards and so on, so that you have something that potentially scales as your community grows. Because that, I think, you've actually identified exactly the problem here with this community, because as it grows, every online community that's gotten above a certain size, and it's different for different ones, runs into this problem, which is that, let me just say norms, because people want to drink, but the fact is norms are typically get elided, they get forgotten.
They only work when everyone in the community knows what they are and like has lived them and understood them. I'm never like saying that things aren't a lot about norms, or like that things are best set as norms. I'm just always arguing that they're there. Sorry.
Right.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
So Stephen Friedman says Stack Overflow has been using this system I'm talking about for years. That may be true, but one thing that I think we ought to be able to do is have different people be able to come and argue, sort of in an arena, a kind of a quarreling arena, where with the rules, with Marcus of Queensberry rules, where they basically have to show each side has to show that they can restate the other side's argument accurately. So there's some way to sort of play to an audience of people who watch real intellectual arguments happen. I think one of the things that we've lost in our larger culture is the idea of honest arguments. We, honestly, we make ad hominem arguments by reflex now. It's easier to just say that people are compromised by who they're associated with, and what we really would like to do is kind of restore the idea that you could have real intellectual discussions. And I don't mean highfalutin intellectual, I just mean really reasoned weighing of different issues. So there are different pieces of this that I'm trying to work on. I don't think it's quite the Stack Overflow model, Stephen.
No.
But I have to look now. Now you're going to make me go look. So
I don't think it's exactly the Stack Overflow. Yeah.
I also feel
ahead,
strongly that, like, I don't want it to have, be time consuming on the show. Not to mention the fact that we're, devoting some time to it as an issue now. I don't want to have a situation in which, we basically have to have a trial for a person in the chat.
No.
I kind of want to, but I do feel strongly that the chat is a place that a group of people, that's a pretty substantial group of people now, have gotten together from all over the world, that it literally ranges from, heads of state to people like you who are, sort of intellectual leaders in fields, to people who are just super interesting, neat folk who, and I think it's a really cool thing that there's this place where every day people are getting together and having these conversations in dialogue with the conversations that Kate and I are having with guests, and that the audience is having with guests. And I'm keen to preserve that as a place where, people can have civilized conversations, including, and like a lot of people didn't like Pontiac's politics. I actually, though I vehemently
mixed on it. You had more of a tolerance for Pontiac than I did. I was not happy with Pontiac.
I was not happy with Pontiac's behavior, but I would hope that somebody who's a hardcore Trumpist and would actually feel welcome on In Lieu of Fun and want to engage with us. I think that's cool if that could happen. I don't know that that's what Pontiac actually was, but I do feel like there's I do want I do want the platform to be, I wouldn't say politically neutral, because neither Kate nor I is politically neutral, but a place where, people, I would want it to be a place where people can disagree pleasantly. That said, I do think flooding the chat with, highly personal attacks on the guests, with, there's sort of objective behaviors that are unacceptable and that make people disruptive presences. And I want to be able to say, hey, you don't get to do that here.
Well, for the metaphor I go with for forums of this size, not too much bigger than this, but of about this size, or maybe a little smaller, is, you have a neighborhood bar, and you have some people who come in. You have different people who come in, are all types, and people get to know each other. Some people know each other better than others, and occasionally you have a problem drinker who is somebody and you have to walk them to the door because they're being disruptive for that night. And then other times, you have to 86 someone. You have to really just say you can't come back. But when you get above a certain scale, I think you have to have these little pockets of community. You don't try to make everybody interact with everybody all the time. You really have to create some voluntary associational communities, and let them see how they work at different sizes.
So let me just kind of to say that we have in the fact that, and I think this was the right move for the show, and I really loved that Ben started out doing this. I didn't even like, this was not my idea. Ben just decided that when we started the show, he would broadcast it on all the platforms. He like got this new software so we can like make it live, and every day we say we go live on Twitter, we go live on Facebook, we go live on YouTube, and we're live on Crowdcast, which is where people can interact with us. I think that that's a really interesting kind of, I think that's an interesting kind of community split. If you really want to come and just watch the content, go to YouTube and watch the content. Like, you don't need to worry about like kind of like, and like if you're interested in consuming it, then like you're not bothered by this chat. The chat problem in particular is for the community of people that like both like the people that are drawn to the content and the people who like to talk about the content while it's happening. And like, that's an interesting kind of amalgam. And so like, that being said, not to make like a Larry Lessig point and make this a huge academic debate, but this is like the infrastructure, the architecture of Crowdcast does not support a ranking system. Or a bifurcation of the chat.
Code is law, dude.
Types of things. Code is
law.
Like,
exactly. Law is code. Code is
Sorry.
Law. Well, you know, the funny, the thing that I really like, the thing that I really like about the chat is that I make jokes in the chat that I would not make if I would not eat up time if you were rapturing me in to make those jokes. But honestly, it's just like I like to think of what one-liner would be appropriate for this moment, right? And
it's kind of like the thing that at a big dinner party you whisper to somebody as like someone else is speaking.
Or pass a note, maybe.
So the overwhelming vote of the poll is in favor of do what we've been doing, expel trolls when they're disruptive, which basically has a chill out with us. You don't actually have a problem here. Do you?
I don't take it like that. I don't think that that's true. There has been a problem. And
no. I don't mean take it like that. I mean, like, people are saying the way we're dealing with it is fine. I mean,
I think you're right about having a plan. I do think that like what that poll doesn't address is like the problem that you've highlighted of. I think in the immediate we can keep doing what we're doing, but I think we need to, in short order, I don't think it would be a bad idea to start naming moderators. If they're in the absence of being able to have reputational points assigned or karma points or like whatever, I think that like just, yeah.
All right, here's what I think we should do. We all know who the longtime trusted voices in the chat are. There are a lot of them, people who we know and regard as, people who've been here a long time, who in an informal sense have built up what Mike is describing as
reputational
equity and credibility in the community. So here I am asking all of said people to keep an eye out for people who are behaving disruptively. And I want to be clear what that doesn't mean. Behaving disruptively is not emphatically saying something that Kate disagrees with or that I disagree with or that you disagree with. It's not taking a position that's controversial or even offensive to you. It is repeatedly behaving in a demeaning fashion either to other members of the audience or to the guest. I'm particularly
I think those
sensitive
are the two people
about the guests because, one of the things that some of our trolls have done is, the guest comes on and we introduce them, and then the troll says, you'd think that somebody with the, from the blank school would know that blank, and would do this over and over and over again, challenging the guest's credentials. There's just something uncivilized about that. And so I ask that you flag those for me and for Kate, and to the extent that you see one another flagging it and agree or disagree. There's a, like, let's have an ongoing self-policing aspect here. And I'm perfectly happy, by the way, to err on the side of, I don't mean to say this in an elitist sense, but to err on the side of exclusivity, in the sense that if the growth of the audience takes place primarily on YouTube, that's fine, actually. If the growth of the audience doesn't take place in Crowdcast and this community stays relatively small and relatively and preserves a certain set of cultural expectations of behavior that we're not going to enforce on YouTube, that strikes me as fine. What do you think of that, Kate?
I think it's great. I think that that is it is a proto level of content moderation. It's a good first step. It's exactly what we can do right now with the tools that we have as people who are on this platform and not building this platform. And so that's fine. And I think that that's exactly right.
You know what I'm reminded
I will
of?
say you gave me the best Christmas present, in which I just get to you're basically being like, Kate, here's this universe that we've built for 275 days. Now design a content moderation system for it based on all your past theories. And I'm very excited about that.
I'm reminded of the fact that when a certain, three-named troll was pestering me and maybe somebody else in particular one day, my natural impulse on Twitter or Facebook would be to, shut the blankety blank person down. But I felt constrained by my sense of the norms of this community not to do that, not to be as mean as I could be.
I love
So
that
I agree.
Ben so open about that. Yeah.
I agree with not being I don't think we should be as mean as we can be in anti-trolling. But I do think the other thing that I am going to maybe experiment with is when I don't love being in the position of it being sort of my sole and unreviewable discretion to expel people. I've always run such decisions by Kate, but I may use the poll for it on occasion and say, hey, there have been repeated complaints about so-and-so. Should I, A, ignore, B, give the person a final warning, or C, expel the person?
It was hard in the case of Pontiac. Right along the line, and there was something valuable about having someone who is conservative in the chat. It felt balanced. I don't know. It was a useful, every once in a while they'd say something useful that was thoughtful and kind of made me think about something in a different way, which is exactly why you want a civil platform to present ideas. That's not so yeah.
All right. Mike, thank you very much. This is super helpful.
Merry Christmas. Happy Friday.
All right. We have 15 minutes left. Should we take audience questions, or do you have other agenda items?
I have no other agenda items. That was a fun agenda item for me. I don't know. It was it actually was. It felt like a theory, like a student of theory being asked to do practice. And I would, and it was but it was fun. It's a fun question. It's a hard question. I didn't realize how it's really hard with the tools that Crowdcast gives you, because it's just hot and cold. You just you can turn it on or you can turn it off. That's it. And there's no nuance there.
David Botts, I invited four people on screen, and you are the first to show up. Merry Christmas. The floor is yours.
Well, Merry Christmas.
Puppy vest?
It's cool in the basement today, so I got the vest on. But I have both Corvids and non-Corvids to share.
I see.
They were stolen from both of you. So
yay! Oh, my Christmas tree.
Excellent.
That's so sweet.
And the Christmas tree.
And the kissing Corvids next to the arch, and the really sneaky rook that looks like a raven and that had me totally fooled on this week's Crow or No. Yeah.
Why
I
did it
thought
look like
it-
a rook, Ben?
So I thought it was a rook because of the massively oversized beak, which is definitely not a crow. A crow has a roughly proportionate to its head beak. So a raven will have an oversized beak that looks like it can tear your flesh off, which it in fact can. Don't ever get into a fight with a raven. They're vicious if they don't like you. So this has a raven-looking beak, but it turns out it is not a raven. It is a juvenile rook, and the reason we know this, according to Kaylee Swift, is the pointiness of the beak, as well as some detail on the hair, the feathering just above the beak.
It hasn't grown in feathers around the beak. That's why the beak looks so big.
Right under its
Yeah,
underneath.
At the beard, and you can't see it at this level of detail. But it's so it turns out it's a there we go.
Oh wow!
There
That's
you
a
can
really
see it
cool
now.
picture. Thank you, David. We should get David to help us do all of our screen sharing since we can't do any of it lately.
I want to talk to you, David, about how to use about how to use OBS because Kate and I have been playing with some options for improving guest stability using so that. And I need to talk to you offline about how to do it. Anyway, the floor is yours.
Hi.
Thanks. It's really great to see you. I mean, I can't imagine a better day than to spend time with my good friends. So this is fabulous. Not to just make everything be a big bummer, but recent events have arisen that I think cause for a reasonable conversation. So in the wake of the near-term unresolved investigation associated with the Nashville explosion, what, in your opinions, are the pressing, both, I'll call it policy and free speech issues facing not only the incoming administration, but also social media providers when we think about both white supremacy and QAnon theories? And then the other, I think the extra special flavoring is what, in your estimation, to what degree are these flames fanned by nation state actors who are promulgating additional disinformation to really cause problems?
So I can take an initial crack at that. So first of all, what happened in Nashville today, I mean, I don't want to make assumptions about who did it, but people are often in terrorist incidents way too quick to make sort of broad assumptions about who did it. That said, there are certain things you can say based on the operational qualities of it that I think are. I stopped following the news about it sort of mid-afternoon, so if there's new information, I don't know, but I think the following things I think you can say with relative confidence. Number one, this does not have the hallmarks of any known foreign terrorist group. I think you're looking at a domestic actor here, one way or another. Would I be stunned if it turned out to be a kind of ISIS sort of thing? No, but I would be quite surprised. This has certain fingerprints associated with domestic actors. Secondly, it was quite unprofessional. Leaving an RV, that has, those are big traceable things. And so, you're going to end up in a situation where when you blow up a recreational vehicle in a downtown American city, there's just a huge amount of information for the FBI to work with, starting with things like license plates. And this is not the way professionals operate. And it's not the way, and it doesn't have the handwriting of foreign groups. It looks to me like a relatively small number of domestic actors. Now, that doesn't answer the question, which ones are they or why are they, right? And you could imagine it being foreign inspired, but not, but it really has the feel to me of, 3 to 5 people or maybe 1 to 3 people in their basements who are angry about something. Do I know that? Of course not.
Well, did you see the video of it playing? Has everyone seen the video?
Playing that it was going to blow up.
Yes, trying to clear the area. Okay, just I don't know what everyone else has seen. So that came to me later than all of the news about the actual but I don't know how much everyone's caught up. Okay, sorry.
So Epi Pete says more like Oklahoma City, and in some ways it is more like Oklahoma City, and in some ways it's not. Oklahoma City was amateurish in its leaving traces. They, again, like this, they used it. It was a huge amount of information they left on the field. By contrast, the device that they constructed was not sophisticated, but awesomely powerful. I mean, it didn't just kill people in the Murrah building. It ripped the entire front half off of that building. That was a very significant firepower magnitude kind of device. And
do you think the point was to try to show that they could build something that powerful?
No. McVeigh was trying to kill as many feds as he could, and
I meant today. I meant today's bombing.
I don't, look, I think almost everything people say in the first hours after an incident is wrong. And so I don't want to try to create a psycho profile. I don't want to talk about whether this was white supremacists or Islamic fundamentalists or left-wing radicals. I mean, I have my own gut instinct about that, but I actually don't think it's useful to speculate about that. I do think we're going to find, my point is, when you see something like this happen, there's no way you can drive a truck like that or an RV like that into downtown Nashville and not have it picked up by 30 or 40 CCTV cams. One of them's going to pick up a license plate. We're going to know really quickly whether that was registered to somebody, stolen, and the circumstances of its theft. Who were the friends of the people who owned it? There are many things that the FBI isn't good at. One of them is not, when something goes boom in an American city, figuring out everything they need to know about and the forensics associated with that. This is what they are good at. And they will capture somebody pretty quickly with overpowering evidence about their involvement in this. There are no great unsolved bombings in the United States.
It's actually one of the most fascinating stories I've ever read. Is the hunting down Timothy McVeigh. It's actually insane. It's straight, you could write a book about it.
Supervised by one Merrick Garland. Whom Jamie Gorelick sent down to Oklahoma City the day of the bombing to take control over it and manage the whole process. So, look, I would say what free speech issues we're dealing with kind of depends on who the perps are. It's a super different thing if it's basically fits into a pattern, and this is not my instinct at all of what it is, but if it fits into, if it's a an ISIS operation in the United States, that is a very different matter than if it's certain white supremacist groups or Q adjacent groups. Those raise actually different free speech issues for a variety of reasons. And it's different still if it's, some lone person who is mad because, they believe in their gun rights. And so I think we're going to have, and then there are some motivations that actually raise no free speech issues at all. Like some people just are violent and want to blow things up. And, that doesn't actually raise
some really terrible suicide, thing, I don't know. Yeah.
So I think the short answer to your question, David, is you gotta wait until we know who people bomb things because they're trying to express something, and if you're trying to figure out what the knife's edge is going to be on a question on these questions, you got to wait until you know who's trying to say what and why they don't feel that conventional speech is an adequate way to express that.
So one of the things that I would just say is David disappeared before I could ask him, but I have not seen anything expressed on the platforms about this. And so I would say generally until there is some, oh, hey, David, was there something that was has there been anything proven about the platforms, publicizing a manifest? But you're just saying, generally,
Nope.
You think that the rise in hate speech might lead to events like this.
So I think about Michigan, for heaven's sake. I mean, people in a conspiracy to kidnap the governor for that's crazy bananas.
There is no doubt, none, that the speech environment right now is going to encourage or is encouraging violence. But unless you know that this is an example of that rather than something else, right? People are radicalized in lots of different worlds by lots of different things. If you're asking me, do I think this is going to turn out to be some kind of white supremacist, Q adjacent, conspiracy theory adjacent, thing? Well, yeah, I would take even money on that. Do I think it's useful to have the conversation now about the relationship between this and the speech environment right now? No, because it's jumping to a conclusion that I think is probably going to be right. But I remember when Oklahoma City happened, and I had no doubt it was Hamas, and
really? Oh, that's really interesting.
I didn't say it publicly, of course, but I was convinced it was.
I like that you updated your priors so that you don't state your conclusion. Well, most people wouldn't do that; they just state the wrong thing again. Or
Hamas had spent all of 1995 blowing up buses in Israel to try to disrupt the Oslo process and making noises about doing more of it. And so then in 1996, a huge bomb goes off in the United States directed at the federal government. And by the way, Hamas had been very actively raising money in the United States. And it just seemed to me obvious this was an effort to bring the fight to the United States to try to disrupt the Oslo process. And that instinct lasted exactly 18 hours until they captured Tim McVeigh, who was associated with the Michigan militia movement. And I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't make judgments about who's responsible for bombings before there was
I really would take the opposite bet. I would take the opposite bet from you, Ben. I don't know. There's something about this that strikes me as actual lone gunman or gun person. So it strikes me as something. There's something about the performance of it and the clearing of people or the attempt to clear people. There's something about like the timing of it. I don't know. There's something, but to your point, just quickly, David, I feel the same about this is like, I mean, the fact that Ben brings up Oklahoma City is exactly the point. Like that these types of attacks have always been happening. There's always been levels of oversight that should have been there, that should have been present to like keep someone from getting like to this much fertilizer, keep someone from like doing like, there should be some type of like, and we've put some of those in place, right? That are like, but I don't necessarily think that, I'm like, I would actually welcome the fact that there ends up being nothing on any of like whoever this was and whoever orchestrated this. Like, it would be interesting to know if there was just like nothing in a profile that like had anything to do with anything. It was just like someone acting alone. We have this very strong intuition, and it's probably, but in the most cases, probably not wrong, because they are spouting hate and activism and violent activism. So that's not incorrect, but I do think that like the number of people that can do that and are willing to give up their life, because I think that there was human remains in the car that they found that like, I'm not sure, but like, blow up the car and go to the trouble of clearing people and doing everything else, that like maybe there's someone, but that just seems, if the goal of, I don't know what like, I don't know. I can't even, I've never been able to understand, like even get in the mind of like this is why I read about serial killers all the time. I find them like that. Like, who would ever want to do that? This is just like, it's like a crazy thing that just seems like this unsolvable human psychology puzzle to me. I mean, just to me, a lot of people.
But this strikes me as exactly the reason. So, to keep our minds very open about this. So when, we've all been primed for disaffected white people violence right now. We've been warning about it. We've been, hey, if people keep talking like this, someone's going to blow something up, right? And then somebody blows something up. And so our minds leap to this as the explanation. And that's exactly what I did in 1996. Hamas had been blowing a lot of things up. They had a policy of not targeting things over, American targets, but they were desperate. And so you're really primed to Hamas violence, and then something big goes boom, and you say, it maps exactly on to kind of what I was expecting. And then it turns out to be Tim McVeigh, who's upset about something completely different in a different world. And so I just say, let's let the, Kate's instinct is, this looks like a lone actor. My instinct is, smells like Q adjacent small group thing to me. I'm sure to some people, this looks like an ISIS inspired thing. I just say, like, this is what the FBI is good at. By the way, if there are human remains in that vehicle, there's DNA. We're going to learn a lot real fast. So let's just hold your question until we know what speech we're talking about.
Lives in Nashville and has, if you've not been following Radley Belko, who was on In Lieu of Fun with us.
Indeed.
And is wonderful. His Twitter feed has been rich with this, but also, David, I just want to say, I mean, not just you, Tony, Richard, and Esther, everyone, I'm going to forget people. And like, I just wanted to say, like, there have been so many days that I've logged on and I'm tired and I'm like, very much don't know what to, like, don't know what I'm doing, but like, David, your background has been so uplifting. Your positive, like, hopeful spin on things is so uplifting. Tony, I love your stories and getting tweets from you and like seeing replies, and Momo, and like Richard, you always have great questions. So like, I mean, this is just the people on the screen. I could literally do this for the entirety of a show, is thank everyone on here. Both of the Alices, my Godwin, obviously, like Joyce. Like, I'm just like, there's a million
all
people
three
in the
Alices.
Feed. Are there three?
There are three Alices.
Oh, it might have melded. That in my mind. Well, like, anyways, thank you guys. It's been really wonderful getting to know you, and it's really fun, and I learned a lot from you, and like, you come up with better questions a lot. I would say 90% of the time than I do, so it's really great. Thank you for coming on.
Yes, all
Hi,
of
Tony.
you. So Tony and Richard, we're basically out of time, but let's take your questions as a group and we will address them on the way out.
And we have tomorrow.
Okay.
We do. And tomorrow and tomorrow, which creeps in this petty pace from day to day until the last syllable of recorded time. Tony, the floor is yours.
There's an entire generation of people who think that's a lyric from Hamilton, right? Sorry.
Yes.
There you go. I was hoping I could show you something in the spirit of Christmas, and I'm going to stand up and I promise you I won't Tobin you.
Okay.
It's okay. Okay.
Thank you.
My wife got us matching outfits, matching house outfits.
Oh my gosh. Do you have little
see.
That is so excellent.
Okay, that's going to live
All
on
right, that's
for the rest of
that's
my
the best
life.
thing ever.
Come back
Yeah,
and
that's
haunt
such
me
a comfy little
next
outfit.
time I get a job. Yeah. Merry Christmas to everybody and a happy holiday to everyone. And
to you.
The community is great, and it would be great to figure out a way to keep the chat what it is without causing the two of you any more friction than required to provide this free service that you've been providing us. So some of us have actually already gotten together, kind of formed a little group, and we kind of just keep an eye out and kind of remind each other not to engage when we see people.
Well,
but we also don't like slap people down or like, oh, we don't agree with that. But when we see the walls of text and stuff like that, we might send a PM to each other and just say, hey, maybe not engage this guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get sucked in and you just forget.
Yeah.
So my question goes back to the issue of trolling, if that's okay. And it's kind of a question to Kate. And that is, I really do like the idea of people using the real identity. I'm Tony Kava at Gmail, Tony Kava on this, at Tony Kava on Twitter. I'm always like, it's kind of like a courage of your conviction thing for me. It's like, this is who I am and this is what I think. But I could see that being easier for me than it would be, say, for a woman. And I just want to throw that over to Kate and see if there is kind of like, for lack of a better way of saying it, like kind of a gendered, that might be a kind of a gendered response to trolling.
Yeah, no, that's a sweet question. I actually think that I would kind of throw it backwards to say that there are two historic kind of issues in content moderation, and two of the most mobilized groups at the very start of kind of the internet and everything else were the Anti-Defamation League to fight anti-Semitism, and groups that like worked on gendered like sexism and harassment against women. So I think that this has borne the experiment of this has borne that to be true as like a woman and as a Jewish person, like that. I actually think that maybe Ben gets more harassment because he's more high profile than I am and has like a larger following, and people come on to kind of express random grievances. I'm gonna knock on wood, even though I don't really believe in that. I don't know. I think YouTube was really bad. It made me feel really bad at the very beginning when I felt kind of ridiculous, not ridiculous. That's absolutely not the right word, but like, I felt kind of like I was doing something bigger than I should be doing this show. And it was kind of like a crazy show. And like, we didn't know what it was going to be. And like, how were people going to receive it in my field? And I was having a drink, and like, what was that going to look like? That when I would go on YouTube and people would be saying that I looked stupid, or I was playing with my hair, or that I was, that I'd have
a drunken cupcake,
or that I was a drunken cupcake, that I'd feel really bad. Like, I'd be like, okay, like that's I thought I said some smart things on that show, and that was like all anyone took away. And I'd worked really hard to sit there, and I'm very fidgety. If you haven't noticed, and I like fidget with things, and like I have hard time sitting still, and so like even sitting in one seat for like the entire hour has always been hard for me. I'm like, Yeah, it's there are little things like that when people pick up on it, you feel very exposed. But like I would say that generally it's been I mostly try to focus on the positive, which is that there is just this incredible group of people who has been overwhelmingly kind and interesting and brilliant that I've gotten the chance to connect with. And it just like blows away all the other crap. And that's a very lucky ratio to have. And I like recognize my luck and my privilege and like having that kind of like that balance. But I feel very lucky. I don't spend a lot of time. I don't feel bad ever getting onto like, and also Ben is always like, yeah.
By the way, the ratio even on YouTube is lovely.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
It's like there are a bunch of assholes, but there's like 200 really cool people who are, mostly just watching, and most of them, when they have something to say, it's a lovely thing, or it's a question, or so. I mean,
I feel like
the problem
really
has never been the ratio. Richard, you get the last question today.
All right. Well, I'll try to keep it light. Hello. But I do want to say that this. So I think I started watching about in August, and this has been one of the highlights of my pandemic experience. I mean, I really enjoy the community in the chat, and
we love having you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you ask great questions. I love your questions. They're just always wonderful.
Oh, thank you. It's from my past as an interrogator. No.
Excellent.
I was imagining like a Russian accent and like, you will talk.
You will talk. So Ben, we know that you listen to Gesualdo and Handel oratorios and Mozart operas and Wagner and Puccini, and what's even more important, we know about that you exhibit superior judgment in your clear-eyed assessment of Rachmaninoff. So, I'm wondering if you could just fill us in a little bit more on the music that you listen to, on the styles, composers, periods, and so on.
So I will limit this answer for purposes of brevity to classical music. I also have a fairly serious interest in both historical and contemporary in both jazz and British Isles folk music, as well as some other folk traditions. But I would say my classical music listening is, broadly speaking, more German than Russian. More interested in it's because of Maggie Feldman Pilch. People on Twitter have the sense that I'm generally an opera buff, which I'm not. I'm a Mozart buff and a Verdi buff, and I love Baroque music and chamber music of most periods, particularly the Romantic period.
Ben, can we do the show on this tomorrow? Can you share music with us and like recommendations?
I'd be happy to, but we'd have to figure out how to share on Crowdcast. But I think
if one of us didn't have their headphones in, we could maybe play it. No. Anyway.
But we could. Back when I'm using my machine at home, it would be easier, I think. But this gets back to the conversation I want to have with David Botts. I would say that's largely, and I do, you're correct to note that I have a particular love of Handel operas and oratorios. And I, including less than well-known ones. I mean, there are basically 30 plus of them, and I love them all.
There are more than that.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There are too many to.
And I think it's just one of the most awesome bodies of music that there is. So that's a loose answer.
Oh, that's a great answer.
I want to know what Richard likes to listen to, but we
yeah.
should...
So let's turn the question around.
Oh, it depends on the time of my life. I'm mainly Austro-Germanic through the long 19th century, so 1789 to 1914 is what we usually say it is. But I also go back to Monteverdi and Bach, and then I go up into the 20th century. I do like the Second Viennese School and a lot of the, also the post-1945 avant-garde. And then after that, I think it kind of gets silly. But yeah, that's what I cover. I did, when I went to grad school, I actually planned to be a Verdi scholar. And then that field started to, like, people weren't as interested in Verdi. So I made a shift over to Richard Strauss. But yeah,
I love Strauss.
My interests are all over the place. Well, now see, I've become the anti-Strauss scholar, but not for. There's a lot of Strauss that I still like. So
I have no idea any of like what you're talking about. So this is amazing. I kind of really want to learn about it. I would love an episode in which we had you guys on to talk about music. That would be great. We should do that in the future.
We should do that. And we should break up the, we should break it up and do episodes on different periods.
Yes, that would be great.
Super fun. But we gotta figure out how to share YouTube videos on Crowdcast to make it work.
Being awful. Yeah, we'll figure that out. Okay.
All right, we are way over.
We're way over. Bye, Richard. Ben, we can sign off.
We will be back tomorrow. We don't have a guest yet, I don't think, do we?
It's Saturday.
No. Oh, yes, tomorrow's Saturday.
That's why I kept wishing you happy Friday.
Oh, yeah, it's Friday. We'll be back. It'll be just us again.
I know. We're just going to do this again. That's why
22 hours.
Tomorrow. Okay.
22. This is the longest episode we've ever done. 22 hours and, 42 minutes from now. And until then.
And do all a good night.